Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse because I just saw it yesterday. Really quickly, if you're wondering what my thoughts are, just watch the movie. It's a great movie. I don't want to say too much. If you haven't seen it, you just want, like, oh, is it worth seeing? Well, worth seeing, and I'm going to leave it at that. Going forward, everything is just going to be me going into spoilers and just talking about how awesome the movie is. So, but from top to bottom, it's just an amazing movie just because it's like, just the animation's really good, and I like how they utilize a lot of the music, just like, because obviously it plays a part in the movie just because that's kind of how Miles kind of calms down a little bit. I actually kind of expected him to kind of like make that like a thing, an aesthetic of his or something, like maybe like, I mean, I guess later on he doesn't need it anymore, but like, when he's singing and he's hanging, like he can't unstick, and Peter's like, just relax, and he's just like, she's going to hear you, and he's literally singing out loud. I love that, but I thought maybe like he kind of incorporated later on, maybe like do headphones or something to kind of like blast music to kind of keep him calmer. But nevertheless, like a lot of this stuff about this movie, and maybe it's just because I saw it in theaters, it kind of made me go, whoa, like, I don't know, like, especially the stuff where you see Miles kind of flipping and then he's falling from those great heights. It's like, because I think it hits me in a, because I think what this movie also captures is not just the feeling of just like, you feel like you're Spider-Man, because it's like a Spider-Man game, it's like, they especially because they were like, you thwip and then you release. Thwip and release. It's like, that's exactly the flow you have to go through when it comes to Spider-Man video game. Obviously, like, more recent Spider-Man games have added, more to it to kind of let you go faster and stuff like that. Obviously, that didn't really necessarily get played into the movie in that regard, but it's still, like, sick that like, it made me think of that. Like, it hits me with this bit of nostalgia of feeling like, because it's an animated form, and it just makes me nostalgic for all the different Spider-Man cartoons I've watched over the years, but also for the fact is it's just not even just nostalgic for it being animated. I mean, like I said, it's just a beautifully animated movie too, and it's just, oh, it's so good. I also do appreciate, because I'd already heard about the comic book aesthetic, but I really like that when it's just like, especially when like Miles is saying something, he's in the background, and then like you see the comic book bubbles kind of saying what he's saying. I was like, that's so, I love that aesthetic. It's so good. It's actually kind of interesting because like there's an Ultimate Spider-Man video game that has a very like heavy comic book aesthetic. I mean, obviously like the Miles Morales storyline and stuff like that pulls from the Ultimate Spider-Man comic book. So I thought that was kind of neat. Some moments of mine I thought were pretty neat was like the whole Liz situation when Peter's there and he's trying to flirt with her and everything. She's like, aren't you supposed to be dead and like, better shape? I love that everyone's poking fat. He's like, you just called me fat. He's like, no, I didn't. Miles said it, Aunt May said it. I love it. But then he's trying to flirt, put on the charms for Liz. And then she's like, you're gonna die. I was like, oh. I was like, I guess she's just the mad scientist that's a part of all of this. That's just, I was like, I guess in my head I was like, oh, she'll be a little sympathetic. Maybe she's kind of being forced to. I was like, at this point you can't not know what Fisk is up to, but nevertheless. And then she said a moment of like, and when that happens, I can't wait to see it. And Peter's like, okay. I was like, that's kind of dark. And he was like, what is your name again? And she's like, Liz Octavius. I was like, I literally audibly said out loud. I'm surprised it didn't bother the couple that was beside me. I was like, oh, I literally said that. I had to go, shut up, Michael. Why did you say that out loud? I was like, that caught me by surprise. I didn't expect that. So I'm assuming like in this universe, she's either Octavius's like, daughter, and she's the one that becomes Doc Ock, or maybe Octavius doesn't exist at all in his universe, and she's the only one that's Doc Ock. She's the one and only Doc Ock, which I feel like it probably leans more towards that direction. So I did like that whole parallel universe aspect because, as they say in Doctor Who, it did some timey-wimey stuff because, like, using the whole Gwen thing. Like, the Gwen and Peter thing kind of threw me for a loop because, obviously, I went into this movie knowing about, like, the multiverse, essentially, and stuff like that. And so, when you see Peter and stuff like that, I'm like, wait, aren't you supposed to be dead? Because I know in the comic books, like, that's when Miles really steps up to be Spider-Man, is when Peter dies in his universe, in the Ultimate Spider-Man universe, because obviously Peter's still alive in another universe, just like in this movie. So that's when he stepped up to become the next Spider-Man, much like this movie. So that's why it kind of caught me off guard. I was like, wait, you're alive? But then I saw the blonde hair. I'm like, oh, the other Peter had brown hair, because I remember from the previous, I was like, so that's where it's like, so you die in this universe and then the other, which correlates with the storyline anyway. But I thought that was so interesting, especially because, like I said, playing with the timey-wimey stuff, it's like, the fact of the matter is, it's not even the same Peter. The Peter from this universe died at 26, which is interesting because I think in the comic books, he typically and the Ultimate Common was, I think it's like 16, not unless that's just a continuity change in certain regard. Maybe they didn't feel right potentially killing off a kid, because that's pretty dark. When I first found out about him dying in a Commonwealth, I'm like, and he was so young when he died too. I was like, that's dark. So maybe that's kind of, I mean, it's also a PG movie, but they still kind of tackle some dark stuff. But I mean, even Spider-Man dying, I don't know why. For whatever reason in my head, I have like PG movies aren't going to go kind of that dark. It's like, oh, I'm pretty sure probably like Up was like a PG movie as well, but they kind of did, so, but especially with this, it's actually kind of interesting. I'm all over the place, so I do apologize, but like, I know with like Noir, apparently I'd heard from someone, I don't really know it, but someone was like, Noir's backstory, like obviously the movie, I'm about to call it a game, the movie keeps it a little lighthearted, but his actual backstory is actually super dark, and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, and obviously they kind of play into that a little bit, him being all dark and mysterious, and I love it. Like, well, how's there wind blowing? We're literally underground. He's like, wherever I go, the wind blows. I'm like, okay, I love it. And it doesn't hurt. The fact is, it's Nick Cage voicing him too. That's awesome. But getting back to what I was saying before, it's just, obviously, like, I'm sure, Peter being older obviously plays into the whole mentor role. Kind of go into that a little bit more later on. But the point I was trying to make is that we've also got, like, the Peter from the other universe is older. He's been at it much longer than this universe's Peter. This universe's Peter had been doing it for 10 years, which is interesting considering the fact is Marvel's Spider-Man, the PS4 game came out, and he was doing 8 years there. Especially when you look at the suits. I'm stumbling. A lot of those suits in the Spider Cave, I guess you'll call it, are all suits. A lot of them are suits you can actually get in a PS4 Spider-Man game, which are pretty dope. You even see the Superior Spider-Man suit. It's the one with from the PS. It's the main suit, the one with the white Spider logo. I thought that was so dope. I mean, to be fair, it's Sony, so it's like they can do that, pull from their own properties like that. But I just thought that was like the dopest thing. Well, Sony / Marvel property, considering everything. Nevertheless, but the one that we kind of follow the most, Peter Parker, is he's been doing it like twice as long, and basically his life kind of sucks. Him and MJ broke up. They were married, got divorced. Aunt May passed away. It's like, jeez, dude. And that's kind of why he is the way he is. Because the other Spider-Man is like, even if I got knocked out, I'm gonna get back up. Like, life was pretty good. But the argument could be like, if life kept going in that direction, like, would it have eventually gotten to the other world, Peter situation, or was it just kind of like, yeah, it's just kind of interesting because it's like this Peter was kind of on top of the world, and this other Peter kind of like was kind of beat down and just out of his luck. That's why he's kind of like, I love him being like this terrible role model in the sense of like, it plays into the aspect because he is older too. Like, I'm sure it's also the aspect of because the reason why him and MJ broke up is because he didn't want to have kids. It scared him, and now here he is kind of looking after a kid in that regard. So obviously that's the parallels there. And having to make those tough decisions as, the adult in the situation while also being a superhero, because the fact is he didn't want Miles to get mixed up in this, because each one of them's kind of got their tragic backstory of people they lost, like their Uncle Ben's, in Gwen's case, her Peter Parker, her best friend, because the fact didn't matter. And that's so interesting because that was kind of a nod that I understood that, because obviously they pull a lot from the different movies, like one point, like obviously, stopping the train and stuff like that. That's like, from Spider-Man 2. But like Gwen's situation, like her dad was even fighting, like it was a fight with the lizard afterwards. It's like, that was like how her dad died in the Amazing Spider-Man 1, the movie. So, and that was also Sony, so they could also pull from that in that regard. But I'm guessing that's just how her storyline typically goes, because her dad typically probably dies in her storylines, but in this universe, she becomes, Spider-Gwen, but a Spider-Woman, and ends up saving her dad. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing, but she ended up losing her best friend. Like, each one, it's kind of a sad thing, like across the board, every one of the Spider people always lose something. It's kind of like a sad, badge with everyone. I even love that when Miles found out about his Uncle Aaron being the Prowler, that Noir was kind of like, oh man, that's a hard, what was it? I forgot his exact word, but it said essentially his almost like, oh, that's a hardcore origin story. I just love that. But the point I was also making, was trying to make also before I like went on a huge tangent, was like, the other world, Peter and Miles mesh together because of them. Like, because Miles is so upbeat and he wants to jump into this whole Spider-Man thing. At first, he kind of didn't want to, but he made a promise to this world Spider-Man. And it's like, if I don't do this, I'm not going to get these guys back home, nor am I going to save my family in this city. And so it's nice that he's kind of upbeat and ready to go for this, where you have like the other Spider-Man like, oh dude, I've been doing this so long, I'm so tired, I'm so beaten now. Ugh. You know, it's like, fine, this is how this is going to go. Watch. He's like, Fisk is going to say, you got 24 hours. He's like, 24 hours. He's like, seeing I told you. It's like, it's so routine by this point. So I love that, because it's like, yeah, I mean, I love that aspect, because it's like, yeah, you've been a superhero for a while. So like, yeah, you kind of, you know the cliches, you know the routine and stuff like that. So I thought that was kind of pretty dope. I also love when they ended up trying to like walk out the lab after everything, and they're like, okay, try to act casual even though you're both standing there in your Spider-Man suits. And I love, for whatever reason, Peter wore those sweatpants so damn long. I don't know why you didn't just take them off, but he literally wore them for so long. And also all the scientists were like, they're Spider-Man, and literally all pulled out their guns and stuff like that. It's like, right, they're all evil scientists, so there's that. I also love learning about Miles' situation too, of like how, because I don't really know that much about Miles, like the fact that he has unique abilities like that. I like the moment he electrocuted Peter, I was like, whoa, what the hell is that? I was like, oh, is that like a power of his? And the whole like invisibility, I guess it's more like a camouflage thing, but it might be pure invisibility. It was like, oh man, that's so interesting. The way that Spider was glitching like that, did that mean that Spider came from a different universe? I would assume so. I don't think it's from this universe. It probably came from a different universe, which is kind of an interesting thing, because the way it was glitching out like that made it seem like it was from one. But I mean, after it was dead, it didn't seem like it did that anymore. Did it? I don't remember if it did it one time after he came back to look for the Spider's body, but nevertheless, I thought that was just kind of interesting that he has such unique abilities. Kind of running through some other stuff. Earlier I brought up the whole timey-wimey situation. That's what I thought was kind of neat about Gwen, because like I said, like how I got confused about a Peter Parker situation. I got confused about a Gwen situation. I was like, oh, so I was like, you're going to meet Gwen at school, and then you're going to meet the other Gwen and be like, oh, that's going to help you with the Gwen from your world or something. It's like, no, that Gwen literally is from another world. She's just been there a week. And I was like, oh, dude, the multiverse and time all over the place. I love it. It's so good. I also love Lamar being like, well, it's a long story. Bam, they all ended up in this world. Actually, it's not that long. But also learning about the others, like Spider-Ham's situation, that was interesting. Wasn't it that he was a human that got bit by a radioactive pig? Wasn't that like the whole, what was that whole thing that he was explaining? I love his situation, for whatever reason, especially the way the aesthetics of his background, his backstory, his origin story kind of reminded me of Ren and Stimpy for some reason. I don't know why, it just did. But I like Penny's situation. That was interesting. Like the whole, like her having a psychic connection with the spider that bit her, and that spider operates in that robot. And that was so sad, because later on in the movie, when it breaks down and stuff, I'm like, no, your spider buddy's okay. Why are you crying? And then it clicked in my, I was like, right. That was the last thing her dad made. That was like a last reminder of her dad. That's why it was such emotional. I was like, right, I'd let that slip my mind. That's why, like even though her spider buddy was okay, like the robot dying, being like that, it was like, you know, it was like she still had her dad with her the entire time. So I thought that was kind of like, you know, an interesting thing. I love that Noir's whole thing was him being so obsessed with the cube, and I love him talking old-timey and stuff like that. It's so good. This movie has such good, it's funny, it's got like plenty of action. Like I said, like it made me go a lot of times, just because like the action is so good, and just like the falls and just the camera work. And I love every time like when he pulls off of stuff, it ends up like ripping, like breaking the glass on the building, or like on the or getting stuck in Gwen's hair and her hair getting stuck to his hand. Now that was awkward. I love Aaron teaching him the whole like I did that off camera, sorry, touching someone on the shoulder and go, hey, and he kept doing that over and over again. And like even in that short amount of time, they brought you like this bond between Miles and his uncle, that kind of a relationship you can kind of tell he didn't necessarily have with his dad. Like him and his dad were close, but obviously him and his uncle were probably a lot closer, but obviously there's the distance between his dad and his uncle. We never really found out, but I'm assuming it's just because his uncle kind of went down the bad guy route. It's interesting because like the moment his uncle popped up, I was like, I kind of already knew, just because like I said, it's one of those things I heard because of Homecoming, because people were like, oh yeah, Donald Glover's character is Miles' uncle, so that was kind of like, yeah, Miles exists in the MCU in that regard. So it's actually kind of interesting too, speaking of the MCU, his roommate that he freaks out when they're like, wait, like Spider-Ham was like, do animals talk in his universe? Because I don't want to freak him out and he passes out. I even love later on when he wakes up, there's webs everywhere and he got like, whatever, kind of goes back to sleep after being unconscious. I love that. But that character is something I've also heard, like Ned in the MCU with the whole Spider-Man situation, Peter's best bud Ned in the movies. He is that character in Into the Spider-Verse who's kind of basically set up as like Miles' best bud at the end there. It's like, oh, I even made a friend. That dude is kind of who Ned is based off of, which is kind of interesting. I even love that they didn't make that like a big part of this movie. I think that's probably going to be like future setup and stuff like that, but still. It's actually kind of interesting too, the whole Wilson Fisk situation. I was like, why is he doing all of this? And it's like, oh, the reason he's doing this is because Vanessa saw what kind of a criminal he is and took their son away, and when they were running they ended up getting hit by a truck and died. So it's kind of like, oh man, you can sympathize a little bit, because it's like, I want to get back the people I love that I lost. It's actually kind of sad, because when he was fighting Miles, like the dimensions started bleeding together, and all these different Vanessas and his son Russell saw him and were freaked out and was like, no, stay away. You know, it's like, he's not the man they thought he was. It's kind of interesting, because the interesting parallels between that, because obviously when you look at like the Marvel Netflix stuff, Vanessa embraces those aspects about Fisk being the villain, the bad guy, crime boss that he is, and it's just kind of interesting to see them kind of do that complete opposite. And there's like, I was like, wow. And that ultimately ended up leading to his family dying because of that. And it, like I said, it just kind of made you feel a little sympathetic, which is interesting, because it's like, because, you know, Fisk makes his whole point that he's going to make it so that Miles never sees his family again. But the fact of the matter is, you already took his family from him when you killed his uncle now. I love that tense scene in the his uncle's place. It's like, because Miles didn't realize like what's going on, this guy's sneaking in. It's like Miles was probably piecing together, but it wasn't until he took the mask off, he's like, whoa. And the entire time, it's like one thing to know that your uncle's a bad guy, but also find out, because he was there during the fight with the original Spider-Man from this universe. Like, if Fisk hadn't killed him, most likely his uncle would have, and then he had to reveal himself to his uncle. I'm like, it's me. And it's like, I was actually wondering, I actually thought for a second, I was like, his uncle might actually do it and that might break Miles, but it's like, no, he didn't do it and Fisk did it. For him, it's like he felt so bad, because it's like, I, you know, wanted to, you know, do the best for you, but I guess for him, it's like, you know, I guess things just never worked out, so the villain route is where he ended up going down. The Prowler isn't the character I'm that familiar. Once again, like, I only know the character just because of all the, like, Donald Glover stuff, you know, said about him in Homecoming. That's the only reason why I know about that. It's also sad too, because Miles' dad and his uncle weren't on good terms, and that's actually what pushes, you know, his dad to want to go, no, I want a better relationship with you, because obviously, like, his mom is kind of like, don't push Miles too hard, but you know, his dad is like, no, he knows how great Miles could be, so that's why he pushes him so hard, because he loves him and he's so proud of him and knows how great he could be. And the fact is that he, after losing his brother like that, we were apart for so long, you know, now he's gone, I've never had that chance to make it up. He's like, I don't want that distance to exist between you and me. And it's so sad, because Miles is like, webbed. And like I said, I think it does a good job of kind of that friendship and family aspect to it too, because it's the whole aspect of like, even when it's all said and done, all of them, you know, for such a long time, they've kind of been like the only Spider-Mans in their respective worlds. So to know that there are other people out there who've been through what they've been through, who live every day to protect the people that they care about, in the city that they care about, by being Spider-Man, like, it kind of helps keep them going, because it's hard kind of going at this thing thinking you're alone in it, but knowing that there are not just the ones you met, probably countless others. I did like that they threw in a lot of enemies, like obviously threw in Tombstone. We saw a picture of Hammerhead, because there was a few villains. I probably, like, Hammerhead was the only one I really noticed. I'm sure there was others up there, but like, obviously, like, I like that a lot of his villains in this universe are more monstrous forms, like Green Goblin. I've only seen the Green Goblin monstrous form. I wonder if that's specifically an Ultimate thing, because Norman became like that in the Ultimate cartoon, because that actually ultimately deals with the whole like multiverse and him actually meeting other Spider-Man. You know, now I'm actually thinking about the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, I did think about that too. Like, oh yeah, the Iron Spider suit, interestingly enough, in the Spider Cave, isn't the one from the MCU, because obviously they want to keep that its own thing. Because even the one in the Marvel Spider-Man game is the Iron Spider suit from the movie, because I guess because that's the one most people would be familiar with. But in the cave, it was the red and gold one. But the whole point I was saying about the Ultimate Spider-Man situation was because I never got that far in the show, because I got around season 3. The whole other Spider-Man situation pops up in season 4, so I still have to go back and finish that and, like, you know, watch that. So, but I love Miles' suit. Like I said, probably like it is probably now like just the like, especially the way it looks in this movie. It looks so good. Like, I love that he took the original Spider-Man suit and he painted it the way he did to kind of look like it. And I like that aesthetic of, like, I hope they do something with that design in some shape or form. I'd like, because obviously, like, the Marvel Spider-Man game, like, they have to add that into like a one of those, into, like, you know, because potentially Miles is a playable character, potentially, you know, the DLC wise, but also like the whole, like, maybe in a, well, definitely there's gonna be a sequel because the game did super well. But I want the whole, like, hoodie and shorts. I kind of wish he had it on. I didn't know how I really felt about it the first time. I thought it was kind of cool, but, like, seeing it again, I'm like, nah, that's pretty dope. I think it's also because I like hoodies. They look so cool. I also love the whole, like, cape situation. Like, Spider-Man was like, no. Peter's like, no. We don't do the whole cape thing. But then it's like, oh, here's another Spider-Man with a cape. I wonder if that like a Doctor Strange thing. It most likely isn't. It was just kind of back in my head, but because it's actually interesting, because, like, I know some designs of Black Panther are he has a cape, so it's probably more so kind of along those same lines of just aesthetically at some point in Spider-Man's timeline, you know, like just across the many years that Spider-Man has existed, that he had a cape at some point in time. I also like the little Stan Lee cameo too, and just being like, oh, he knew Peter and stuff like that, and he's like, and, you know, Miles is buying the suit and everything, and he's like, well, what if it fits? He's like, don't worry, it always fits. And then look over to the sign that says, like, no refunds, and you have Stan Lee just smiling, going, God, I was like, that's so good. I even love that quote too, and the quote at the end I thought was kind of nice, because it all fits kind of the aesthetic of the movie too, because, like, when Peter died, it's like, you know, he was just some guy. Just circumstance led him to becoming Spider-Man. We all have the potential to be Spider-Man. I love Miles being like, yeah, it's up to me to do that. And the guy nearby was like, actually, I don't think she meant literally you. I think it was meant to be a metaphor. And just I was like, that's so good. That also is another thing too. Like, I was actually expecting to do more with it, but they didn't. Because I figured that was probably one of Peter's main reasons for wanting to stay in his universe, because it's like, well, his Aunt May is still alive, plus MJ, maybe, you know, he hasn't screwed things up in his universe, maybe he has a chance, but it's like, no, he needs to get back to his universe to try to fix things with MJ. But I love him talking to MJ, and he's just like, I'm so sorry, and she's like, what? Because she doesn't know it's him, because like everyone there is in Spider-Man suits, and Noir's like, it can't be that easy. They literally walk in with just bow ties on. It was literally that easy. I also love when they're kind of training Miles, all of them are kind of hitting him hard. You know, Penny telling us like, oh, can you hack and do stuff like that's what being attacked? He's like, wait, what? You're kind of throwing a lot his way. I would assume amongst all of them, he is the youngest. It's actually interesting because I think Miles is actually older in this than he typically is in the comic books. I think when he becomes Spider-Man in comic books, he's only 13. To be fair, it's like Peter's only like 14 or 15 when he does. But still, like, I think Miles is a little bit older in this regard. So, but like when Miles really gets his moment to shine and everything, like at the end when he's kind of kicking butt, like all of them working in conjunction with each other is so dope. I meant to bring this up earlier because I forgot. Went off on a tangent and everything, but the Scorpion thing too, like I completely forgot about Scorpion being the monster that he was too, but nevertheless. But like I was also bringing up earlier too, I referenced like the whole thing that his uncle taught him, and it was very nice that when it was all said and done, like, you know, he walks up to Fisk, Miles places his hand on his shoulder and goes, hey, and electrocutes him and it sends him flying back, webs him and it swings him at this. I was like, that's so good. I love his way of fighting, and just like the action in this is insane. Like obviously like he does it to Peter, like what Peter did to him, tripping him and grabbing him. Like I said, it's kind of interesting, even though Peter was kind of like the most like lays about, you know, version of himself and just kind of not wanting the responsibility, even though having the responsibility, but kind of almost being down on himself about the whole responsibility, just it kind of eventually weighing on him. like the fact of the matter is, like I said, he made that adult decision to kind of try and look out for Miles because he, because I love it because like everyone, because they're all the selfless heroes that they are, it's like one of us is going to have to stay behind. I volunteer, like everyone volunteer. I thought that was kind of interesting. I also love Spider-Ham, like his whole thing, like Scorpion calls him a cartoon and he's like, what's wrong with a cartoon? Pulls out like a mallet and stuff like that. It's like, I love that he just makes that thing. He even gives Miles the hammer. It's like, I hope you keep that and use it in some random point, like in a potential sequel, because I think this movie's done well enough for it to be a sequel, but I'd love for that to be a thing where he's just kind of like one day just pulling it out because it's like, it'll fit in your pocket. He's like, I guess that's all, folks. And you hear Peter like, is he legally allowed to say that? I was like, that's so good, because I love, because this movie did such a good job of like breaking the fourth wall in certain degrees, because like obviously it's kind of like, because Spider-Man kind of does that. Once again, going back to the Spider-Man Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, in that like there'll be points where like the screen would go black and white, but Spider-Man would stay in color and Peter would talk to like the audience. So I thought that's kind of interesting. So he kind of has a little bit, I think probably even in the comic books, he kind of has a little bit of the Deadpool thing, probably not to the extent that Deadpool does, but I think to certain degrees he does. And I love that being a moment, but I also love that Miles, how he really kind of first started learning a little bit was like all the different comic books and stuff like that. He's literally reading comics where what happened to him, it's like, I can't unstick and stuff like that. Those are, I wonder, those are probably real comic books too that were used inside the movie like that. And so like they probably stylized Miles' situation after those comic books exactly. And it's like, that's such a neat aesthetic aspect. I also love that obviously like his dad doesn't like the whole vigilante thing, but he's also going to be like, I can't, like, deepen his voice and everything. I'm glad to work with you. I also love that too. I completely forgot about like the whole puberty thing. Like he wakes up, his pants are shorter and everything, and he's like, my voice is like, he's like, I'm going through puberty. I mean, no, because I went through and he's like sweating like crazy, and it's like Gwen immediately knew what that was kind of all about and stuff like that. So. And also the Aunt May situation, I should also talk about that too, was kind of interesting. Like her immediately piecing it together and stuff like that. And even Miles kind of threw that out there, but it's interesting because it's like he literally just had a class about it, so it just kind of all ended up working out together. But like Aunt May was like, oh yeah, you're Peter from another universe, and he's like, wow, you really got that, nailed that. And also she had all those costumes, like obviously this is a universe where obviously she knew about it and she probably even helped him with it. Like she even had the shed and everything, and then Miles was like, is yours like this? Yeah. Peter's like, well yeah, mine's exactly like this, except it doesn't have that, this and that. So I thought it was kind of pretty neat too, and I think that was a good aesthetic choice. Not, well, that being cool and awesome, but I was also, because I get too ahead of my own mouth sometimes with my brain, the whole aspect of letting it be Miles be the one to take down Kingpin by himself, because like this is his dimension and it's his city and family to protect, So I thought that was kind of neat. So I was actually curious if his dad was going to figure it out at the end, like him being Spider-Man, but no, like, he's like, I love you, and he's like, wait, what? But I love that each one of them kind of goes back to their own world. Like even see Noir still messing with the Rubik's Cube, and he even figured it out, and he kind of showcases it to people in the credits and stuff like that. I thought that was kind of pretty neat. But we see at the end, like Gwen is like, Miles kind of like, so that portal is still somewhat open and they can kind of go to each other. So like, a sequel will probably go even crazier, even more Spider-Man, probably all these different villains from different universes and stuff like that. What's also interesting is I love that tie-in at the end with Spider-Man 2099 with Miguel. I was like, what is this? And it was like, oh, Miguel! That's so dope. And then him going back to 67, it was like, that was worth it. He's like, it's rude to point. It's like, no, you were pointing first. Who pointed first? It was Spider-Man, but it's like there's two Spider-Man. I love that because he's like, so where do we start? From the beginning. I also love that each origin had that too. Even Miles said it, being like, all right, let's do this one last time. For real this time. I love that each time they did that. So, I mean, this movie is so freaking good. I remember there was talks about them potentially spinning this off into different stuff, in particular for TV shows, which I think would be pretty dope, because I'd love to get to learn more about all these other characters, because you obviously could expand more into other Spider-Man, especially with what Miguel sets up at the end, him potentially traveling to other worlds with a device. So that probably is going to allow that whole Gwen situation. It's not that maybe the fabric's a little weaker because of the whole thing that Kingpin did, his collider, but the fact of the matter is when it's all said and done, like maybe Miguel meets up with Gwen and that kind of, because he is going through all the Spider-Man, probably because like the next movie we might deal with like Madam web. That'd be pretty dope, because that takes me back to the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, where that was a storyline, like the final arc, you know, because they sadly got canceled, but the final arc of it was him meeting up with all these Spider-Men from all these different universes. And so there's actually, I can't remember which one it is, because there's a Spider-Man game like that too, where you focus on all the, is it Shattered Dimensions? I want to say it's that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's that. So stuff like that, those storylines have obviously existed in some shape or form, whether it be animated, TV show, or, you know, a video game. So I'm interested to see them kind of do that movie line wise and get to be introduced to all the other Spider-Man, because I love Spider-Man, but I don't really know that much about Spider-Man comic book wise. So I'm always interested in learning new stuff, seeing these new villains and stuff like that, especially, you know, villains that I am acquainted with that, you know, maybe we haven't necessarily seen in other cases, like Tombstone. Trying to remember the last time I saw Tombstone, and I want to say it was the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. He's a villain I haven't really seen pop up that much. Hammerhead, he's popped up in video games. He's literally in the most recent Spider-Man video game, to be precise, too, because he's one of the DLC characters. He's even referenced stuff. So it's just one of those little things. I think he's the only villain that popped up in this I have not seen in a long time. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this video. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good